Welcome to the Ryerson Democracy Forum, where we ask how to do democracy differently, how to get people engaged, how to keep voters involved. My name is Regg Cohn. I'm a visiting practitioner at Ryerson and also a political columnist at the Toronto Star. A special welcome if you're joining us on television, and thank you to CPAC for broadcasting our events. Our guest today is Canada's Green Party leader, Annamie Paul. And before I formally introduce her, let's acknowledge the land that Ryerson University is on. There we are. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory, which refers to a treaty among the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Over time, Indigenous nations and all newcomers have been invited into this territory in the spirit of peace and respect. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest. I first met Annamie Paul in 2019 when Ryerson asked me to host an election debate on the environment. She was not yet leader, but she represented the Green Party as their candidate in Toronto Centre, a political unknown, and I knew nothing about her. But as I read her biography before the debate, I started paying attention. You'll see what I mean. Her political career began at age 12 when she worked as a legislative page at Queen's Park, got to watch the grown-up politicians in action. She grew up to become a lawyer, graduating from the University of Ottawa. Her master's in public affairs is from Princeton University, where she had a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. She worked as a Canadian diplomat in Europe. She was an advisor to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. She founded the Canadian Centre for Political Leadership, which focuses on diversity in public life. She's also worked as a director for crisis action, which helps protect civilians in conflict zones. And in Barcelona, she co-founded an NGO that helps the fight against climate change. And with that international background as a diplomat and activist, she was appointed by the Green Party to be their critic for foreign affairs. And then late last year, she won its leadership race, becoming the first Black leader of a major federal party and the first Jewish woman in that role. She may also be the only leader who speaks French and Spanish and Catalan. Welcome to our Ryerson Democracy Forum, Ms. Paul.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be back at Ryerson. It's a wonderful, wonderful institution.
I love your biography. I love the geography, working and living overseas. But now let's get to work. So I'm going to kick off the questions. My first ask is for our audience. Now's the time to start thinking up your questions for our guests. You can send them via the chat function on Zoom. And Ryerson's Hila Bakhtari is waiting to hear from you. Just give us your name so I can give you a shout out and I'll read out your questions. And just a heads up, this is not a news conference, it's a democracy forum. So the questions can be about policy, but also about politics and personalities and how they all come together to engage voters. So my first question is not a gotcha, it's how you got here. When you decided to get into politics, I know you were checking out the major parties. Just tell us what you were looking for. How close did you come, tell the truth, to joining the Liberals or New Democrats? And just tell us why you landed on the Greens without over promoting the Greens, but just the idea of looking for parties.
My job description, but literally is to be the head cheerleader for the Greens. So I'm going to do my best to damp that down a little bit for this answer. First, I wanted to acknowledge that I also am here on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee, which I say with a great deal of gratitude. And yes, I mean, in terms of my political journey, as you mentioned, I spent a lot of time working in international affairs abroad. And when I came back to Canada and for the first time in many, many years, had the chance to even consider joining a party, because much of the work that I had done was strictly nonpartisan in nature. I did all the due diligence. You can imagine why from my CV. I went to local meetings of riding associations. I spoke to friends who had worked intensively with the different parties. I certainly looked at the NDP, the Liberals as well. But for me, I
know you probably didn't look at the Tories because they did not support carbon pricing. So at the time, and now they're slowly coming around. But just were there any temptations? Did you come close to any of the other two parties?
No, I really came back. You know, I had the opportunity to look at every party with fresh eyes and an open mind, having had some distance. And so I didn't come in with any preconceived notions about any of them. It was really just, it was a blank slate. And I said, these are the things that I'm looking for. This is a big commitment I'm making. And I'm going to look at all of them and decide where I would feel most at home. But you're right, Martin, there really is tends to be a default towards the Liberals in particular for immigrant communities. You know, I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school to say that my parents, certainly as immigrants, you know, the default was you just vote Liberal. Pierre Trudeau brought you here, you're going to vote for his party. So if I had any default at all, it probably would have been that.
Okay, if you looked at the Liberals, apart from that link you just mentioned, it also implies for a lot of thinking people that you're serious about wielding power, serious about being in government and not just on the outside. But you chose a party that's never been in power and has barely been represented in parliament, despite your best efforts. How do you get up every morning to fight for the two goals that seem so elusive? First, getting action on climate change, which we'll talk about throughout the hour. But second, just getting elected. How do you get the ambition and the motivation when it does seem like an elusive goal?
A couple of things. First, I had the good fortune of working in and near countries where Greens had been rump parties when I moved there, and then became parties with either the balance of power or forming parts of governing coalitions. So I'm lucky to have a sense of history and perspective when it comes to the possibilities of Green parties. And then the other thing is that, you know, you read a bit of my CV there. I've done a lot of different things. I've been a social entrepreneur. I'm not afraid of taking risks and investing in something that I really believe in. And so when I found the party that I thought most closely reflected my values, most closely reflected my approach to politics or the kind of culture I wanted to be a part of, I wasn't afraid to invest in that, even though I knew that it was obviously going to be a longer road to hew than had I joined one of the larger parties.
Okay, so you land on the Greens, but part of democracy is not just coming to your own conclusions, it's about persuading people as a politician. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. But why do so few other Canadians choose the Greens? And, you know, this is a democracy forum. Tell us, how do you grow? Our subtitle or our blurb today was, how do you grow an environmental party in a tough, sometimes hostile political environment?
Well, we're certainly a party that wants to be known as the party that offers the most progressive and also implementable practical policies on the climate and the environment. We're much more than that. You know, our commitment to the environment and the climate is based in our commitment to people. And so you can't talk about the climate without talking about social policy. And we have spoken about all those things for many years. But we're called the Green Party. So naturally, that's the thing that we tend to be most associated with. The good news really is that we have seen throughout this pandemic that the climate and the environment have not fallen off the agenda, not at all. People really understand, I think in a new way, that things are interconnected and that a healthy planet is directly connected to their health as well. And that our health, of course, is connected to the general well-being of our society. So, you know, this is a moment actually when we should be making, and I'm working very hard with our party to make breakthroughs, because I believe that the messages we have been communicating for a long time are really coming home to people in Canada.
Okay, well, I get, and I had a hunch you would say that you're not a single issue party. Let's park that, circle back a little later about what else the party stands for. But as you say, you're Green, so let's talk about the Green movement. The other parties have tried to raise their game. I think it's fair to say they've raised their targets. The Liberal government, Prime Minister, aligned more with the US President Joe Biden at the climate summit last month on Earth Day. Canada is now saying it will cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% over the next decade. That falls short of the 60% target that's perhaps needed to reduce global warming by 1.5 degrees. But it still falls short of the 60% that's needed. So that's better though than the previous commitment of 30%. Okay, and by 2030, the national carbon price is going to rise to about $170 a ton, which is a lot better than before. But I know you're going to tell us that Canadians, and I've written this, are among the highest per capita emitters on the planet. So you voted against the Liberal plan last week. Tell us why the new goals aren't good enough, and then tell us why your goals are good to go and why they're achievable.
Martin, we are just some of the most collegial, cooperative folks out there. And I have to tell you that it is one of the things that attracted me to the party. So it's never, ever easy for us to vote against a piece of legislation. It's never easy for us to come out very strongly against a proposal. We always try to find the common ground. At the same time, I feel very much that I have a responsibility to be just frank with people in Canada when I see something that is just an empty shell. And this is what this is. There is no true accountability in the Climate Accountability Act. Let's begin with that. We have a target that simply will not reflect Canada's fair share of getting greenhouse gas emissions down. The advisory council to the minister related to the act has already been appointed before the bill has even entered into the committee stage, with very little consultation. Certainly, we were not asked who we thought should be on that advisory council, and it reports directly to the minister as opposed to reporting to Parliament. So it's not even arm's length. And we know that unfortunately, successive Canadian governments have had no problem in breaking international commitments that they have made. We have never once met our targets under the Paris Agreement. And so if accountability just meant announcing a target and that would be enough to get everything done, then that would have happened a long time ago. So, you know, I don't want to, we're speaking, I think probably to a lot of young people today, I hope have tuned in. I don't want to mislead any of them. I don't want any of them to think that this is nearly good enough, because it isn't.
Okay, let's shift a little bit to the politics behind the planetary goals. I mean, I think we talked about some of the numbers. Let's talk about personal political goals. When I first met you at that election debate, you were trying to win a seat in Toronto Centre. You came in fourth, and then you won the party leadership last year. You ran again in a by-election in the same riding, and you came in second, increased your share of the vote considerably. I wrote a column at the time asking why Jagmeet Singh refused to extend the so-called leader's courtesy to you, which means withdrawing the NDP candidate so that you're not running against each other and splitting the vote and letting the Liberals or Tories and other ridings squeak through. After all, that is what the Green Party did when Jagmeet Singh ran in a by-election. Leader's courtesy was extended by the party. He did not reciprocate. Now, a lot of New Democrats don't like when I ask that question. I got a lot of heat when I wrote the column, and there are all kinds of reasons that they'll say why it doesn't apply. But interestingly, at our last Democracy Forum last month, Jagmeet Singh was our guest, and he was asked by a faculty member here, a visiting practitioner like me, Kathy Crow, who has been a New Democrat, run for the NDP. Jagmeet gave her a shout out. And then she said that she had been asked to run against you and refused because she believes in the leader's courtesy. Do you?
I said at the time, and I'll say again, I know that there has been a candidate for the NDP that has already won the nomination in Toronto Centre, that I had no expectations whatsoever that would be extended. I am accustomed to breaking down a lot of barriers. I didn't for a second imagine that that this one would be the by-election would be any different. And I have to say that I expect the NDP and the Liberals to come just full guns a-blazing, total shock and awe in the upcoming general election. So we're just going to have to do it the hard way. I think that I'm the best person to represent the riding. I have a great deal of respect for the other candidates, but I believe that I am the best placed person to win that riding. So, would it have been nice? I mean, I wouldn't have said no, but that being said, I did not ask for it. We did not ask for that, and I did not expect it in any case.
Okay, but you came in second. If those NDP votes had gone to you, you probably would have won.
Maybe. I try not to look back, and we had a very short period of time. I tend to think of this in terms of, had we had a little more time to make our case, we likely would have won. Had people understood that I was actually a very competitive candidate, They might have decided to vote for me. I'm hoping that some of those things will come into play this time around. You know, we've had people come and say, gosh, I really had no idea. I had no idea it would be that close. I had no, I didn't think it was worth going out for a protest vote, but gosh, had I voted. And so I'm hoping that that's going to carry through to the next election. And we want to win votes from other parties. We need to win other votes to win, but we're going to have to do it the good old fashioned way.
Okay, I'm going to sneak in a question that we've received, and then I'm going to follow up on that. In fact, the question is, do you think there is a possibility for the NDP and Greens to form an alliance on climate and the environment? And while you're thinking about that, I want to just follow up, because the Greens always talk about the need to cooperate. You just said that, and as against a protest vote. And the fact is, as you'll often mention, in Europe, there have been long-standing coalitions with the Green Party. Also in Canada, not a formal coalition, but an agreement, a written agreement in British Columbia between the Greens and the New Democrats to not have an early election and to support a common agenda. And then, surprise, that agreement fell through when Premier John Horgan decided to go early to the polls. I believe it was last year. So there was no leader's courtesy. There's an agreement that was not respected. This is not a blame the NDP session. I'm just asking, how do you, as the Green Party leader who's talking about cooperation, how do you persuade people that that's not naive, and that in fact it takes two to cooperate, sometimes three? How do you persuade voters that your rivals will play nicely with you?
I mean, we're really here to focus on ourselves and to demonstrate a certain model of politics, a certain culture of politics. And we hope that it's going to be appealing to people in Canada and they'll vote for more of us, because, that's an excellent question. We certainly are not naive. I definitely don't consider myself to be naive, but I'm also not willing to sacrifice our values. I'm not willing to distract people with partisan issues that really don't get to the heart of their burning concerns, as a consequence of that. So whether it's the climate or whether it's any social policy, we always extend the invitation to the other parties to join us, to work with us. We consistently say on the climate, let's form an inner cabinet so that we can all work together on this in a nonpartisan way, the way that we did at the beginning of the pandemic, recognizing that this is a shared doom that we all face and we all have a role in solving it. Martin, I noticed that at the conventions not that long ago that the Liberals and the NDP had, I think we counted 6 or 7 resolutions that were almost verbatim the same between those parties and our party. I would love to agree with the other parties to extend the life of this parliament long enough to see those shared policies actually brought into law, and receive royal assent. That's the kind of party that we are. We believe that people want that more and more. People are really committed to collaboration and cooperation and don't need all the credit, don't need to pretend that they have nothing in common with the other parties and are looking for that common ground.
Okay, and by the way, I would never suggest, and I don't think I use the word naive, I would say idealistic. I'd never accuse you of naivete.
Oh, you said naive.
Perhaps, okay, then I take that back. Let the record show I withdraw, Your Honor. But I do think about it in terms of idealism. But seriously, let's personalize this for a minute. Not because I care that much about personalities, but let's humanize it, I guess I mean. I asked this trick question of Jagmeet Singh. He didn't really give me an answer, and I'm guessing you may not, but let's try it. How do you actually get along with Jagmeet Singh personally? I think it's human nature to want to know, as you said on COVID, you kind of came together for a while. We saw a bit of that in Ontario. We know that your predecessor, Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh, had some harsh words on the campaign trail in the last election. He accused the Green Party of being soft on abortion and vice versa. The accusation said the NDP was soft on national unity. Never mind. How do you get along with Jagmeet Singh? How do you get along with Justin Trudeau?
In the case of the Prime Minister, we've had a few opportunities to meet and speak. He kindly called to wish me well after I was elected as leader. We met at a briefing, the one and only briefing that he had with opposition leaders on COVID during my time in this role. And we spoke briefly ahead of the presentation of the 2021 budget. So, you know, those are collegial. I've made it clear to him that wherever we can find that common ground, we're definitely going to find it and work with them. But if we feel that they're headed in the wrong direction, our job is to hold them accountable. In the case of Jagmeet, he has not called me yet. But we have crossed paths on a couple of occasions, and you know we've had the opportunity just to briefly say hello. But you know, we don't have any particular ongoing relationship. There is a lot of overlap and a lot of respect between our membership, and that's something that I think is a great foundation for us to build on. As I said, between the three of our parties, and I know I don't need to add our 3 Green seats to the mix, but between the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens, if we wanted to get action on the areas that our members have said they want us to prioritize, things like universal pharmacare, long-term care, guaranteed livable income, the climate, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the national action plan for them. These are all things where our members are in total agreement. We could extend the life of this parliament long enough to have action on those things, but it would require putting aside some of the partisanship. It would require being willing to share credit. And you know, I don't know if the parliament is up to that at this point. And that's something that I think is frustrating a lot of people, including me.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, as a journalist whose job it is to speak to people from all parties, it's often surprising to me how I mean, politicians pretend to be nice to journalists. It's part of your job description, but it's interesting to me how the rival parties really do sometimes view it as a competition, and it's competing teams, and there's really no handshake until the end of the game. Let's talk about diversity in Canadian politics. You spent much of your life before politics trying to get more voices heard. Now you're the only woman, the only Black, the only Jew among federal party leaders. What is the biggest single obstacle that needs to change to have more diversity in political participation, but also representation, getting elected in Parliament?
In our parliamentary system, what the research tells us, and I just want to give a quick shout out to the professors at Ryerson that have done such extraordinary research on this topic of, on this issue of underrepresentation. The biggest barrier really are the parties themselves. The parties are the political gatekeepers. We know that women, we know that people of color are as electable as their white male counterparts. In fact, we know that women are slightly more electable than men, all things being equal. You need to put those people, though, in winnable ridings, and you need to provide them with the financial and human resources to run credible campaigns. But people in our country, as we know, we saw that in the last election, as we have in previous elections, they tend to vote for political parties. Your local candidate, unfortunately, only accounts for a very small amount of your vote. I think only about 15% of Canadians in the last election said that they even considered their local candidate in choosing how to vote. So if you can get underrepresented groups winning the nominations in winnable seats, then that changes everything.
Okay. You've promised to make the Greens the most diverse party in Canada. What internal barriers do you face within the Green Party? I know you're a loyal reader of the Toronto Star, and my colleagues have written about some of the obstacles you may have faced, quoting, though, your own supporters and even you, and campaign workers saying that you've been blocked and ignored by party officials on the national executive. Now, I know you're going to say that you don't want to wash your dirty linen or the party's dirty linen in public, but here's I think a fair question. Are your ideas on diversity being heard, or are people closing their ears to it within the Green Party? And how are you dealing with that?
Well, the membership voted for me very recently, and the slogan of my campaign was diversity, democracy, and daring. And I led from the first ballot. So, and I think, I think that given how recent it was, how explicit I was, and I know no one else will remember this, but I'll never forget it. the campaign was almost 9 months. I mean, it was a never-ending leadership race that we had. It was the most, I'm very comfortable saying it was the most thorough vetting of a group of candidates that has ever happened in federal politics. And so the members who voted for me with their eyes wide open, knowing that this was going to be a priority. And so I believe it's their priority as well. And I believe that it's something that they welcome. So for me, I'm really focused on how do we get that going as quickly as possible. In our party model, I don't control all the levers of the party. We have a much flatter, much more horizontal structure. But the Time to Run campaign is something that was launched via my office. We're very proud of that. That's a campaign to attract diverse candidates from across the country. All of those leaders that, as you said, don't necessarily see themselves in politics, haven't imagined it or consider there to be too many barriers. And we've had hundreds of people apply to be contestants through when I say contestants in nomination contests to become candidates for us. So, you know, as I said, it's really, a lot of it is up to the parties. It's about how much you're willing to invest in proactively going out to find new members, to reach out to diverse communities, to find diverse candidates. You can't wait for it to happen. We saw with the Green Party that it wasn't happening organically. We know that we had and have a lot of work to do. And so as long as I'm the leader, we're going to be doing some of that work every single day.
So the last time we talked about this about a month or two ago, you chose your words a little more carefully. I'm listening carefully, and it sounds like you are emphasizing more that you really did win a mandate from the membership in this very long 9-month campaign. So does the National Party executive need to hear this message a little more clearly?
Again, there's a certain discipline that comes with the years of being a diplomat and being a lawyer and a policy analyst. I mean, I have a great deal of respect for governance, and I don't think that will ever be appropriate for me to discuss internal party meetings or discussions in forums like this. I think that that's the kind of discipline that people expect to see. And certainly for the Green Party, you know, people want to know, given that we're a younger party, that we're ready to govern and that we're able to do it with discipline and professionalism. So certainly any messages that I might have for our executive, you know, I can just tell them directly. I don't need the megaphone of the media to do that. So I'm going to just say again that I really believe that we have a common mission within our party to diversify it. We know that we had a challenge, we have a challenge. I believe that I am a reflection of our commitment to that, and I am personally committed to that.
And that is the message I did hear last month. I just thought this is a different forum, so you might be more candid about it or more explicit about it in order to help amplify a message that perhaps isn't getting through. But is there a concern that if you're not getting the organizational support that you need, given that very consensual, collaborative structure you've spoken about in the party's model, it'll be hard for you to run the kind of national campaign that you need to get elected, to get more members elected, and to achieve finally official party status in the House of Commons, which requires 12 seats?
So I'm sure you know that you have certain assumptions built into the question that you just asked.
Premises, you'll call it.
Yes, there's certain premises there. And all I can say is that we're working extremely hard to get ready for the next election. Those of you who live in Toronto Centre, you will have seen that we have our posters up at bus stops, that we have ads in the local papers. As I said, we've been running for several months now, this national campaign to recruit a truly diverse slate of candidates to do our part to help to create a truly diverse parliament, and not just in terms of race or ethnicity either. I mean, we're talking about the true diversity of Canada, which we still don't see at the highest levels in politics. So, you know, we're doing all of the things that a party does when they see all the telltale signs that a parliament is about to dissolve in the near future. And that is the work that I'm focused on, absolutely. So as I said, I feel empowered by the mandate that I have from our members. Our members are very, very supportive. I meet with them every week across the country at different meetings. So I'm ready to. I mean, I wouldn't even say I'm ready to go. We're already there. We're already doing the work to put ourselves in a good position for the next election.
Okay, one more question from me before I turn it over for more questions from the floor, because I promised you we would circle back to this. The Green Party is identified with going green, saving the environment, and you're different from other big tent parties because you do have this sharp focus. It's the starting point for the Green Party, but not the end point. So you're going to tell us that you're also about pharmacare, childcare, minimum guaranteed living wage. But most Canadians still see you as a single issue party. So how are you going to change that?
Part of it is having elected me. I think it was a very intentional decision of the members to elect me, because as I said, I was very clear about the things that I wanted to do and the things I wanted to talk about. And I don't think that anyone would imagine, and certainly it hasn't been my experience over the last 6 or 7 months, that given my experience growing up in an immigrant family in the inner city, with several essential workers in my household, growing up in a very modest way, that I could possibly only be interested in the climate and nothing else. And so it's been a real conversation starter with people. It's very easy for them to imagine when I'm talking about things like long-term care or a guaranteed livable income or tuition-free post-secondary education, why my personal experience gives me some credibility and also suggests that the Green Party is also serious about those issues. So if anything, I would say lately, people have been saying, what about the climate? Because people that look like me aren't normally associated with climate activism. We unfortunately, at the top levels of most things, we still have a lack of diversity in this country. And the climate and the environment is also one of those things. So if anything, I've had to struggle to say, look, yes, of course, I'm interested in universal childcare and affordable housing. But I am someone who has a track record on the climate as well. And that's still something that's very important to me and to our party. So I'm definitely a page turner in a way for the party. And this moment that has put so many of our social policies right at the front that we've been talking about alone for years. Decriminalization is one of those things. Guaranteed livable income. In 2019, you were there. These were things that no other party was talking about. And so having some of our policies really prove their worth during this period, I think also has caused people to give another look and look at our social policies.
Well, I'm a bit relieved because I was worried you would come to a Ryerson Democracy Forum and not talk about free tuition for post-secondary education. So I'm glad you checked off that box. But you did miss Brampton. I think you were, am I wrong? Were you not born or raised in Brampton before the inner city?
So my mom was a teacher. She was really committed to having her kids become bilingual, right? She's
that's right.
As a good Canadian. So, and there were no French immersion programs there. So
in Brampton. Gotcha.
We lived between 5 and 7 days a week with my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, and the kids, all of us in a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto. And so the thing about immigrant families is that my mother was a teacher, but my mother's income needed to spread not just between our family, but all of the relatives back home, all of the people that she and my grandmother sponsored to come to Canada over the years. So it was a very, very modest way of living. And so when I talk about things now, for instance, vaccinations and the need to vaccine hotspot communities in Toronto Center, it's from a place of personal experience. Our family would never have escaped COVID infection had it been during the years that I was growing up with 3 essential workers in the house living in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's impossible. So bringing those experiences to politics is exactly why diversity is important. We create better public policy when we have a variety of perspectives and experiences around the table.
I just didn't want you to leave Brampton out of the equation because there are a lot of students who live in Brampton.
My brother was valedictorian at Chinguacousy. So for any of the Bramptonites that are out there, they will know Chinguacousy. And he was
can you tell us who
Can
you tell us who your sister is as well?
My sister is Jagmeet Paul. So some of you will know her. She had a play and a show on television called The Kink in My Hair, which apparently is still very popular. And I think they're still showing it on CBC Gem. She's also a producer and an actor. She's won, I think, several Dora Awards for her theater work. And she is the producer of Free Up, which aired last year and will air this year on Emancipation Day on CBC as well. She's the star. She's the star in the family. I am but a mere satellite.
Yeah, but you cheat a little bit because she's probably a pretty good acting coach in terms of helping you with the performance and all the TV stuff that you have to do as a politician.
If people like what they see, and apparently I got a good rating from that room.
Rate My Room. Yes.
Rate My Room. It's because of her. She was sick and tired of seeing me poorly lit with nothing behind me. So yes. I did notice Room.
Okay. You have talked about diversity, so I'm going to throw a different kind of diversity at you. This is a trick question, not from me, from the audience. I don't have a name attached to it, so folks, do add your names if you can, so that I can give you a shout out. Ms. Paul, can I call you Annamie?
Yes, you can. Thank you for asking.
How do we work through the apparent East-West divide with regards to climate goals, especially for those whose jobs will be largely impacted while moving to a low carbon economy in the West? Are there other countries that have figured this out, or is this divide really overblown for political purposes?
The last part of the question is the answer. There are many vested interests that, and I am no conspiracy theorist, but there is clearly a series of vested interests that seek to perpetuate this East-West divide in terms of the climate, in terms of our future. And I want us all to do our part to just dismantle that. We've had a series of surveys done, not our party, but some of the major polling outfits have polled Canadians across the country, even during the darkest days of the pandemic. And the polls say consistently that across the country, including on the prairies, including in Newfoundland and Labrador, that the overwhelming majority of people in Canada want to see ambitious climate action. When they are asked, do you want your government to be ambitious on the climate? They say yes. When you ask them, do you believe that there is a conflict between the economy and the climate? They say no. So when we go directly to the people, we have our answer. And the answer is that, wherever you are in the country, you want Canada to do its fair share. You think that Canada can be a leader on the climate. Unfortunately, there are those that are going to be seeking to pump the last little bit of oil out of the prairies, or do just one more oil exploration project. And when there's not one more dollar to be made, they're going to cut and run, and they're going to leave those communities high and dry if they can. And so this is the moment for political leadership. This is the moment for people with a longer range view to say, we are going to step in and make a plan with those communities, with their involvement, to transition them while there's still time and before we leave whole areas of the country decimated because we did too little, too late for those people.
Okay. By the way, in fairness, that same trick question was thrown to Jagmeet Singh by an audience member last time, because the NDP also has to reconcile some geographic divisions, which are not that easy. Here's an important question. Do you have a plan, does the Green Party have a plan to push a resolution for water advisories on Indigenous reserves? How do you deal with that?
We do, and if you take a look at our 2019 platform, you'll see our proposals there. But this is I don't have to say the obvious, which is that it's simply unacceptable. And of course, we've learned throughout the pandemic that many of these ongoing delayed commitments, the unfulfillment of them is really a question of priorities. It's really a question of where do we choose to invest, not just the money, but also the human resources, the resources of government, and ending all boil water advisories. I will immediately say that there has been important work done. There has been money invested. It's not that the government doesn't care. They just haven't made it enough of a priority. And I will take Jagmeet's point on this. It's an excellent point. He says it very well, which is that if Toronto had undrinkable water for even a day, how long do you think it would take for the governments to mobilize to fix that? How long would it take? And that's the point. That is really the point. So yes, we do have a plan. Yes, it is something we're very committed to. And again, we're happy to work with any party who wants to work with us on getting that done as quickly as possible.
That is an important point. I think that also counts as a leader's courtesy. So I think Jagmeet now owes you one shout out on a serious issue. The promise of this is an important question that I've pulled out here. The promise of the Green Party getting sufficiently represented in the Canadian and Ontario parliaments seems to be Canada's young people. How long do you think it will take for the political voice of Canada's youth to translate into some more green power?
It's a mixed bag, my answer to that question of it. It depends on the day, because I am the mother of two young people, a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. And I have seen throughout, particularly my leadership campaign and the by-election, just the incredible capacity and leadership of young people. And as someone also who is deeply involved in the climate movement, of course, the climate movement is largely being led by young people. Most of our major mass mobilizations at this moment are being led by young people. And so we know that young people are leaders, that they are engaged, that they are highly capable, and yet we're still not giving them, and I say we, all of us, we're not giving, all of the parties, we're not giving young people enough reasons to show up come election time. The voting rate is still about 10 to 15% lower than the average. That is a difference maker. That is a difference maker. So, I'm trying to do, again, we try to do our part. Much of my leadership campaign, much of the work that I do now is led by young people, very young people, because they're extraordinary and their talent is undeniable. We try to share messages about the reasons why it is so important to take that civil society commitment and vote so that you can have a partner on the political side. I'm hoping that will come through in the next election, and we're certainly doing the work, but it's a challenge. And Martin, I think part of it is that if I think back to my youth, and I accept, by the way, that I'm no longer young, though I hope, maybe I look at it a little bit, I accept that I'm no longer young. You can just sniff out hypocrisy. You can just sniff, you can sniff it out. You can sniff out when you feel like you're wasting your time. And so asking people to vote in a system that's first past the post, where promises are made and promises are not kept, where the style of engagements, the rules of engagement are very hostile, where the environment is very toxic, and asking young people to invest in that is tough when there are alternatives. So, I recognize that, and we're trying to do our part to change the culture so that young people will feel like it's worth showing up.
One of the blessings about being a journalist is that even as you age, you are genetically endowed with a BS meter. So that BS meter never leaves you in my job.
So you don't vote either then?
No, I do vote. I believe in voting. In fact, I believe you can never waste a vote. So as the father of a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old, I hear you on the question of youth engagement. But I want to ask you from your experience, because the Green Party, people talk a lot about diversity. You talk about diversity, but in terms of, the Green was a white party for many years and is predominantly, it's also a very old party. Nothing against old people because they are wise, but you can't do it without young people to do the heavy lifting. So in your experience, what works in terms of youth engagement, and what doesn't work? What's a turnoff?
Inviting young people is, in my experience, has been all that I've needed. You know, when we invite young people, they come. Oftentimes, they're looking for a way in. Whenever I do events with young people, I always try to end and begin and end with an invitation to contact my office directly if they're interested, not only in getting involved with our party, but any party. Because what I want to see is just youth being engaged, you know. I hope they'll choose us, but I'm happy to create that link because often that's all it takes. And then they're just off and running. And that has been my experience. So extending an invitation is part of it. Not being condescending is another part of it. I find that a lot of the messaging that is directed towards young people really suggests that, you know, I mean, you don't need to put it to a hip hop track. You know, I love hip hop as much as the next person, but you know, when I speak with my kids, when I speak with other young people, they are completely capable of talking in depth about the issues, about policy. So we don't need, you know, I don't believe that you need a particular strategy. I don't believe that you need, as I said, a soundtrack to go with it. I'm not on TikTok, and I will tell you that, you know, the few ridings that we have polled. We do extremely well, even though we have like a curmudgeon like me who refuses, to do my 2-minute TikTok dance. So just respecting the leadership of young people, respecting their intellect, and meeting them as equals, and also giving them room to run when it's clear that they're ready to take on leadership roles. I find that works really well.
Okay, here's a tough question. I'd like to know what your personal position, not the party's position, that sounds like a trick question, which I know you're not going to fall for, but what is your personal position on nuclear energy? I'm not talking about small nuclear reactors, which I do not think will be helpful to offset climate change, but in general, using nuclear energy as a means to reduce carbon emissions. I'm speaking mainly about advanced fuels like thorium, molten salt cooled reactors, recyclable spent fuel R&D. Your answer.
So nuclear energy is something that has a great deal of potential for deep decarbonization, to contribute to deep decarbonization. The issue with nuclear, and I have said before that these are potentially solvable issues, but the issues remain. It is extremely expensive. It requires a great deal of economies of scale to get it going, which is why you often see provinces agreeing together to invest in it. So it's expensive when compared to the alternatives. It takes a very long time to get online, and we can never forget that we don't have the time that we used to. That there are promising technologies that, had we started early enough, we might have made more progress and might have been able to utilize more effectively now. Nuclear falls into that category. It really takes a very long time to get those projects off the ground. And then finally, we don't have any satisfactory solution for how to dispose of nuclear waste. I have put that question to the nuclear associations. I put that question to my cousin, who is a nuclear physicist, a professor of nuclear physics down in the States. And it really is the stumbling block. There's a lot of thought that's going into this. There's a lot of research that's going into it, but the waste is still there. There still is not a satisfactory way of disposing of it permanently, safely for future generations. And so when you add all those things together and you look up the alternatives, the point is there are better, cheaper, faster, safer ways to do deep carbonization than nuclear.
Okay. We can't spend an hour with you without having a PR question. Here's one. Under the current electoral system, it seems difficult for Greens to win seats since they need to win individual ridings held by the larger parties. Do you think it would be more democratic to do away with first past the post in favor of proportional representation? I'm going to say yes for you. Would the Greens coalesce with the NDP if it meant getting this done?
To get proportional representation done?
Yes. Would you coalesce? That's the words, in the words of the questioner. Would the Greens coalesce with the NDP if it meant getting this done, proportional representation?
Well, there's nothing preventing us from coalescing around that issue now. The Liberal Party promised in 2015 to bring in proportional representation, or at least to end the first past the post. That would be the last election, first past the post. We support electoral reform. The NDP supports it. And so there's nothing preventing us from coalescing around that and getting it done within the life of this parliament if we so choose. You know, we've lost so much of that. There's so many moments, important moments in Canada's history where parties came together across party lines to do extraordinary things. It's how we have our Canada Pension Plan, how we have our Canada Health Act. It's even how we got our flag. You know, these were things done in minority governments. Some of these things were passed unanimously. It seems like we have forgotten how to do that. You don't need a formal coalition to do that. You just need people that are focused on the people and the policies that will help them the most. And so absolutely, you know, if the NDP and the Liberal government said to us, you know, we want to extend the life of this parliament so that we can get PR done, we would do it. And we would say the same thing for, as I said, universal post-secondary education, long-term care, universal pharmacare, the National Action Plan for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And I'm listing those ones intentionally because, as I said, our grassroots, and those are the people who should be calling the shots, they all agree on those policies without exception. So, you know, I extend the invitation and I hope they take us up on it.
You talked about cooperation between parties and you referenced COVID. Let's talk about COVID for a minute. Mm-hmm. The world has come together on COVID as best it could. The political parties have to the best of their abilities. I've often worried that COVID, and you may disagree, I think you do from what I've heard, I worry that the COVID proves that people will only come together for an urgent disaster of imminent peril. And then, of course, let's do everything we can to get vaccines and figure out how to share it and get it shots in arms and so on. Whereas for a longer term danger like climate change that seems remote unless you are a true believer. But if it seems like I don't have to worry about it. I'm worried about my job and I'm worried about economic recovery. So what have we learned from COVID in terms of party collaboration, in terms of public engagement and support? Are people really willing to pay a price to decarbonize if for something, a short-term pain for a long-term gain that is well beyond the political cycle? So what is the proof point of this last year and a half as it pertains to climate change?
I really believe that what people have seen during the pandemic, not now, but during the early days of the pandemic, in terms of that cooperation, that coming together, not just between parties and between levels of government, but between communities, between neighbors. I believe that they really liked what they saw. They liked what they saw. They saw what a difference it could make. They saw how quickly things could get done under those conditions. And I think that they are going to be much less tolerant of parties that don't help to create the conditions for that to happen on other issues that are important to them, whether it's the climate or some of the other ones that I mentioned. We've seen the things that don't work, and we've seen how catastrophic inaction has been on certain files that we have delayed and delayed and delayed. And so people, I believe, will have the expectation, the growing expectation that parties and levels of government will come together and do what is needed to get things done. So that's encouraging to me. And in terms of the climate, I believe also that when we tell people now, look, we can do it. You know, we actually can do this. We have a proof of concept now that we didn't before about how quickly we can mobilize our society when we really believe that it's worth it. And so, you know, this is the final piece, the missing piece always is the political leadership and the political will, because this is where government comes in. This is where the narrative comes in. You say to people, look, I know you don't feel the full effects of the climate right now. I know that maybe you haven't been personally touched to a significant extent, but this is coming. This is coming. We need to work on it now the same way that we did for COVID. And I am certain that if the government said that, if we said that, if Parliament spoke with one voice, on that, people would respond to that and be willing to do the things that are necessary. If you indulge me with just one last thing about this, I really want to emphasize that this is the opportunity of a lifetime, that what we are seeing now globally is a green rush, you know, and I'm going to try to coin that because it occurred to me the other night that that's what it is. And what describes this mobilization that's going on across the globe, this massive investment that the EU, the UK, the US, all of the major economies are making in this transition to a green economy. It's really a green rush to position themselves at the front of the line for the economic opportunities that are going to come with that. Canada is way behind on this. If we don't seize this opportunity, then we're really not setting ourselves up for the future. So I want people to see this as this wonderful convergence of factors. We need to bend the curve on greenhouse gas emissions. And we have this opportunity to take the stimulus that we're going to be investing to help move us forward on that and to position us for the future. So we didn't expect to have this tremendous opportunity, but we do. And we need to seize it and to be joyful about it because it really is an extraordinary positive opportunity for Canada.
Okay, time for just one or two quick questions. This is almost one that's focused on the media. Do you see the media landscape changing to reflect more diverse voices and this improving Canadian politics in the near future? Brandon Gomez of the Brandon Gomez Show is a Jamaican Canadian hoping to build a media infrastructure for diverse talent. Do you see mainstream news outlets working to compete with the kind of grassroots content that Gomez is working on providing?
All of these things are better than they used to be. You know, it's very important to recognize that there has been progress, absolutely. I mean, anyone who's lived long enough to think back to what the papers look like, what the columnists look like, what our anchors, et cetera, look like, you see the difference. The issue, of course, there are two things. One, of course, the higher up you go, the less diversity you see. That is still a fact, and that is across society. And then you don't just want to see it here or there, you really want to see it system-wide, particularly when you're talking about the media. You want the people who are the camera people, the people who are deciding which stories get told, the people who are telling those stories, all across the organization. You need the diversity because every step along the way, the process is improved if there is a variety of perspectives. You know, we just know that institutions work better when there is diversity for many, many reasons. I mean, check with your Ryerson professors; they'll tell you. So the media has made progress. Is it fast enough? No. Does it take advantage of the full diversity of the talent pool in Canada, which is the most diverse talent pool in the world? It does not. But I remain confident that we. At least we continue to move in the right direction.
Okay, time for just one last quick question.
Okay.
In order for the Green Party's diversity to be effective, it has to be in some form of power. So how are you going to do this? Question from Stephen Cohn.
By doing events like this, I hope that there are at least a few people who joined us that feel excited and motivated the way that I did when I felt that I had found the party who was proposing the policies that were going to make a difference. It was really important to me to be part of a party that had a certain amount of fearlessness about that as well, that was willing to put those ideas out there first. A party that wants to change the culture of politics, because as someone who has been around politics but is relatively new to being in politics, it's not fun a lot of the time. And I understand why a lot of good people with good ideas choose to take those good ideas elsewhere. And so there will be moments of change and transformation and disruption in other places, like Germany, for instance, Martin. I'm sure you're following those elections quite closely for the chancellor. The next chancellor of Germany may be a Green. They're leading in the polls by a significant margin right now. So I see many of the things that cause people to make the choice to vote Green happening here in Canada. People are ready to choose a new direction. They're ready to, you can't travel down the same road with the same people forever and hope to arrive somewhere else. So we have to do our work. We have to hope that we also touch upon the zeitgeist of the moment a little bit as well. And I do want to see enough Greens sent to Ottawa that our voice is large enough to have that impact that the person who posed the question asked. There's no question that the more Greens there are in Ottawa, the more we can do that work. We do need people to take that leap with us. And I recognize that it is a leap for them because it would be the first time, but we have never disappointed, Martin. Everywhere that we get elected, we get re-elected. There has never been a Green to lose a seat anywhere in Canada, and Green parties that win abroad continue to grow abroad. So I think people will like what they find, but they do have to take that first leap and choose to vote for us.
Yeah, you just have to get elected. Now, you did have a throwaway line there where you said it isn't always that much fun, but luckily for you, we're out of time. So I cannot ask you to explain why it's not fun, because we don't want to discourage anybody. Annamie Paul, I want to thank you for talking about democracy and for sharing your own journey, your political journey, your family story. We appreciate you reconnecting with Ryerson, and we hope you'll come back. And thank you also to everyone in our audience who listened and who asked questions. And a special thanks also to the Faculty of Arts and the Dean, Dr. Pam Sugiman, the Head of Operations, Melissa Wong, and also Hila Bakhtari for helping to organize everything today. Stay sane, stay safe, and safe travels. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin.
Bye for now.